When trying to decide what I wanted to do for this video essay, I decided to go with something a bit different and picked something a bit more musical, a family favorite for generations, Grease, edited by John F. Burnett. It combines both mediums of a movie and a musical, which definitely affects the style of editing in the film. Grease follows Sandy and Danny's love story, and the struggles that they both feel of how to act in high school. Danny struggles between being a tough guy in front of his friends, the T-Birds, and showing Sandy how much he actually cares, while Sandy deals with her disconnect between her new group of friends, the Pink Ladies, while also taking on Danny's new cool guy attitude, which causes her to actually change things up in the climactic favorite ending song. The story jumps around between these characters and the side character storylines of both friend groups, making for a very eventful film and a unique editing style. Of course, in the beginning, our characters are introduced with dramatic shots, with a dramatic fading transition to each shot, showing the long time that has elapsed as they have spent the time falling deeper in love with each other during their romantic summer. As soon as the sequence is over, the tone shifts into what it will be for most of the movie, a more hip, upbeat style that we know and love the film for. Really enough, this scene seems to have more cuts than normal in the film, which I think is because the beginning of the film is like an old romance movie, while the rest of it is shot in more of the style of a musical, as if it were to be on stage. As most of Grease is a comedy, the beginning of this film is a nice introduction into what it will be, as we start off with the dramatic music, but as soon as the scene ends, the music cuts out and we cut right into the upbeat credits, which is like most of the film's editing style, as Grease's humor comes from the juxtaposition posed by cuts between shots that shouldn't go together or are completely unlike each other, pointing out the differences between them. But more on that in a minute.
Of course not. It's only the beginning. No.
The editing makes sure to emphasize the coolness factor of Danny, or rather, how cool he thinks he is. Even adding a little bell noise cue when he smirks when he's first introduced. When we hear his name, the camera cuts right to a zoom shot of him turning around to face us. The camera introduces each group of main characters right next to each other, the closeness of the shots telling us that later on their stories and lives will become intertwined. The T-Birds, the Pink Ladies, and Danny and Sandy. It also helps to pay attention to the uses of color in these scenes and the way that they cut, as Sandy in every scene is wearing light colors or just plain white, showing how innocent she is to the Pink Ladies, and compares that to the darkness of the T-Birds or the Pink Ladies, who both sport pink, red, and black colors. This ties back into the point that I was making earlier, of how Grease's humor comes from the juxtapositions between shots, and the way that they deliberately place shots of people that are so different next to each other just to emphasize those differences. Some of my favorite instances of this in this film are these.
Blanche, do you have the new schedule?
Yes, Miss McKee. I just had my hands on them.
Oh, good.
Come on, guys, let's get to work.
Yeah.
Hey, let's go. Come on, let's go.
Grease never fails to make me laugh when it poses the teachers next to the students, as the students, as seniors, think they are on top of the world. And then we cut to people like Blanche, who are quite literally on the floor searching for papers or pulling tape out of their typewriter, struggling to get things right. One of my favorite examples of Grease emphasizing a difference is this next scene, when the woman on the loudspeaker talks about how wholesome students are, and then we cut to a student, Kaniki, quite literally throwing a frog in another student's bag. Quite wholesome, of course.
Bright, clean-cut, wholesome students we have here at Rydell.
Of course, I could not leave out the most prime example, the songs. In this one especially, Danny sings about saving Sandy's life and how he got lucky and they made a splash and all that. And then it cuts back to Sandy, who's saying such innocent things like they were just holding hands, and it really emphasizes the difference between their two storytelling. When rewatching the film, I at first thought that the lack of cuts was just a sign that they didn't get enough coverage, but I soon realized that they were using so little cuts to make the film feel more like a musical theater performance. The camera often follows the actors instead of just cutting, and when it does cut, sometimes it doesn't even move 30 degrees. The scenes with the most cuts are the car chase and the dance scene. I think this was just to increase excitement, but I also think that it succeeded, as the cuts happen a lot on the music, and with the car chase scene, the cuts happen to give us reaction shots and cut back to wides and really show us all the action that's happening. The fact that there are so many cuts here tells us that, yes, the lack of cuts is also intentional.
Come on, baby.
I especially love the visual comparison of the girl with the scarf in front of the cars to Sandy, and the difference in the reactions between the cuts. When you see her, she looks excited, but Sandy genuinely looks worried about Danny. The girl with the scarf only wants her boyfriend to win. It tells you a lot of useful information about our favorite characters. The biggest part of Grace is to emphasize differences in things, or compare the difference in couples and groups, most of the time in comical cases. There really are not many cuts in between scenes, so when there are, you have to pay close attention as to why it happened. I'd like to leave you on one of my favorite instances of editing in this film. I think the cuts in this next scene I will show you was the most successful, and the way that the camera cuts from the woman talking on the loudspeaker to the students' faces really tells you what's going on inside their heads without even explicitly having to say it.
Who knows, among you there may be a future Eleanor Roosevelt or a Rosemary Clooney. And among you young men, there may be a Joe DiMaggio, a President Eisenhower, or even a Vice President Nixon. But always you will have the glorious memory